I do a video on my experience with doing a carb conversion on a Range Rover Classic. This is an 88 Range Rover Classic that I imported from Spain, and I've brought a few of these over, and one of the more problematic issues can be the Lucas fuel injection system. Of course, they're older now, and I think even probably out of the gate they weren't, the best engineered systems. I'm sure somebody would argue with me on that as far as the fuel injection goes. But on my last one, after a lot of head scratching, expensive parts, used parts that don't really work right, and that sort of thing, I came across doing a carb conversion. And they actually make a kit, Rimmer Brothers. But a lot of the main pieces, the intake and the carburetor, you can get from Summit Racing. So what I did was, it's not a extremely hard project. There's just a kind of a few things to it. But I mean, first, of course, is just removing the fuel injection intake and plenum. So once you get that off, your air intake would come over through here and that sort of thing. Take that off, unplug everything, and basically, get a new intake seal, which is you can get that from Rimmer Brothers. The only things I really needed from Rimmer Brothers, and maybe you don't even have to have all of them, but this front fuel neck comes up, it's kind of down low, and it has to come up, and it's cocked over at an angle. And the first one that I did, I couldn't get it. They listed the part, but it was not in stock. So I ended up just ordering several different ones from Summit Racing and came up with something that worked. I think it was one that you could adjust the angle on, and I think I might have had to drill the holes out a little bit to get everything to work. But I came up with something that worked, and then I just ended up having to kind of piece together some hoses from Napa to get it to the right spot there. This time when I did it, they did have that neck available. So I went ahead and ordered that, which makes it much easier. You can use your stock, the same upper radiator hose that you had before. And so that works out good. There's one other piece on the back, which is basically your exit for the water, or the coolant rather, that comes around the back, and not really sure if be able to really see it, but it basically comes straight out the back and then goes to this hose that is going to come back around to your water pump. And so that, a little bit of plumbing that I had to do to kind of make that work. It's a little bit of a tight spot, but I was able to use, my that one original hose, and just had to splice in another piece to make it up to there, which I just got from Napa or wherever you can get that locally. So anyway, runs really good. I think it runs, idles, accelerates better than it ever did, and I think I had the same experience on my last one. As far as the fuel delivery, you are going to need lower fuel pressure for the carburetor. So you can do one of two things there. On my first one, and on this one I started to do it, but I ended up going a different route. You can get a fuel pressure regulator. These things the good ones, Aeromotive makes one that I've used before. They are kind of expensive. Um, I think they're cheaper ones, but I probably wouldn't trust, having it in my engine bay and that sort of thing. So I think these are really good, and you can do that. And so in that case, if you were to use that, you can kind of see down here, I've got my fuel return line, which you don't need with the carburetor, but if you use the pressure, if you use the stock fuel pump, which is going to be way too much pressure, what happens is you dial it down to, around 6 psi is approximately what you would want for this carburetor. So you dial it down, and then when you do that, it lets the excess pressure go back, into your return line and then back to your tank. Now, what I've actually ended up doing here is I started to do that, but I had problems with my fuel pump itself. So I decided to use an inline Edelbrock fuel pump. They call it a micro pump, which I mounted back on the rail, and that maintains, the correct pressure without having to have a pressure regulator. So as far as that goes, in this case, I can just cap off that return line. Not going to need to use it at all. So back here, where your fuel filter would be mounted on the frame there, I just took that off and used that same bolt hole and mount and just mounted my Edelbrock pump right there, which maintains 4 to 7 psi. It has a pre-filter on it. Then I have a filter up there in front of the carb. Now to do that, you have to essentially gut your rear fuel pump that's in your tank, because the resistance from the pump that's in there, not to mention the sock filter on that, which is probably clogged up, is going to be too much resistance and overwork your pump, and you're not going to get enough pressure. In fact, I actually hooked it up and tried it that way, and I did not get enough pressure. So as far as that goes, on the rear, on the early pre-90 Range Rover Classics, they didn't have any access to your fuel pump. So the way to get to it, you would have to take all these rivets out that go around the rear bed, and take the rear bed piece off, or drop the tank, both of which are kind of a big job. On the first one that I did, I actually tried to do that, and I got all the rivets out and then realized it also had some sealer around it. So I thought, well, I'm not going to do this. And so I basically did the same thing. I just located, where the, fuel pump was, and cut a hole just like I did on this. Now, once you take that out and hope that your screws aren't stripped and all that other stuff, I replaced them. I was able to get them out, and then I put new ones in. So next time it'll be easier if I need to get in there. But you'll have your fuel pump, which actually, let's see, that's the top, which actually fits up onto that fuel line, or that hard line right there, and goes through there. So essentially, you just take that off. It'll just, it's pretty easy to just get off of there. And then you put a piece of fuel hose down to where the fuel pump, would have been on the bottom there. So once you do that, now your pump can pull your fuel without any resistance, and you get the correct pressure. Now, as far as this goes, you can cut that out. On both of these, I don't think I had measurements, and I kind of eyeballed it and ended up, pretty much on the money. And then what I did was I just made it where I could just put it back in. So I just, riveted on catch there. And then on the last one, I'll probably do it on this. Just put some seam sealer around it, because I'm probably not going to need to get to that anymore. Now that my fuel pump is on the rail, I can access that easily there. And so I could put some seam sealer around this. And if I need to get to it, easy enough. You just go around it with a knife and be able to access that. Because on these, your fuel sending unit is actually on the side of the tank, or at least on this one. They might have changed it different years, but the sending unit is actually right there on the side of the tank. So that measures your fuel level. So that's how you would get to that to replace that, which, a lot of times I think they are integrated into the same where your fuel pump is. On this one, it's on the side of the tank. So anyway, you can get to that way. Overall, it runs great. I think it runs better than it ever did on both of these times I did it. I'm sure fuel injection people could argue, but I think that, yes, the idea of fuel injection is great, but on anything English, Lucas, it's just, it's really, kind of, I believe, primitive, and, I've always had issues. So the Carb is once you get it on, mounted, very easy. It's really pretty much plug and play, as long as you got your fuel pressure right. This Carb, I haven't had to make any adjustments other than the idle. I haven't had to change any jets or anything like that. And this is an Edelbrock, they call it an ABS2. This is actually, I guess there's the part number, and I just picked the approximate, size CFM for a 3.5 V8 engine. I think the same carb would work on the 3.9. It's probably a little bit of overkill for, maybe it is a bit of overkill for this engine, but it runs very well. Fuel economy wise, if that's a concern, maybe the injection, probably is more fuel efficient, but as far as runability, drivability, this is my favorite setup. So I thought I'd kind of share this, because I didn't find a lot online about it as far as that goes. And so I thought this might help, some people if wanting to do this. This can, I think, easily be done on the 3.5, the 3.9, maybe even also, I'm sure, the 4.2. But the earlier 3.5s probably had a more primitive fuel injection system than the later models. But still, I'm a big proponent or fan of the carburetor. And so I'll crank it up here. It pretty much hasn't been run. Well, it hasn't been run today. So I'd say it's a cold start. It's kind of warm out. But yeah, it starts, runs, idles very smoothly. You do get, I think you get a little throatier feel, out of it when you're driving, because you're using a carb, and you can kind of hear that. It's not like super loud or anything, but it definitely I would say sounds a little more aggressive than the fuel injection system would, you know, when you're using a carb, because you can kind of hear that air sucking or whatnot. But overall, it just runs really well. My previous ones would not fire right up on the first try. This one always fires up on the first try. It's got an electric choke, you know, as well on there. But I feel, seat of the pants, I feel like it's got, you know, better power in response to me. Maybe nominal, but as far as easy to work on, easy to sort out if you did have an issue, this is, I think, the way to go as far as that goes. So anyway, just thought I would do this video on it, so it might help somebody that's thinking about it as far as that goes.